Hello, everybody, and welcome to This Week in X, presented by Crushing Comics. We have gathered together here with my friends from around the world, my favorite mutant lovers, to talk about a new X-Men #1. It is Children of the Atom #1. And to talk about this, we are going to go into full spoilers territory about everything happening in this issue. And because of some of the topics in this issue, we are absolutely going to be talking about things that are happening in the rest of the X-Men line at the Marvel Universe right now. So you've been warned, these are full spoiler discussions. For Children of the Atom #1, I want to start with Tyler and do our lightning round. There is so much to discuss in this, so let's not dig too deep into themes here. Let us just react. So Tyler, react. What did you think about Children of the Atom #1?
I mean, when I read it the first time, I was a little bit unsure of how I feel about this issue. And then on the second read, I actually loved it. I mean, you know, I love the introduction of Koda and the powers. I love the voices of the kids and the mystery surrounding them. You know, I love the senior X-Men discussing about certain things. And, you know, does this... So the question I asked myself is that, you know, does this issue makes me want to read more of them and find out more? And I ended up with a resounding yes. So I'm going to give this like 4 random Krakoa Gates placements out of 5.
Fariha, what did you think of Children of the Atom #1?
So before I get my lightning round, these are brand new characters. Like
yes.
The ones that are in the
never been seen before.
They're not from Claremont Uncanny X-Men #169 or 2 appearance in 188.
No.
It's just brand new characters.
As far as we know.
They were in one panel of Marvel Voices.
Right, okay, so reset. Okay, so knowing that, I absolutely hated it. Moving on. Go. Next. Harry.
Wow.
I
mention in the ranks.
Go in the middle.
Hate it. Like if I don't have to come back to do another Children of the Atom 2, I'm okay. Oh my god, no. This is not acceptable.
All right, let's get into it.
All right.
Wow.
This book is like the definition of a slow burn where it grew on me. I did not like the opening third. It did not. I think the art is pretty weak. That's going to be my biggest complaint. I don't like this kind of Bernard Chang art, but it grew on me with each page. I think it's a super interesting idea for a comic. When they kind of when the ultimate premise of this book was revealed, I was like, this is a very interesting series of characters to focus on. I have no idea where it's going from here. So I'm like super intrigued. And yeah, I would give this 3.75 weird slang out of 5.
Somehow I've come to even a different place than all of you. Although I agree with some of the things that you've all said. I think this is really valuable because it's something that we haven't really gotten to explore too much yet, and a couple of different dimensions. And I said we weren't going to get into thematic stuff, so I'll save that. But also, I think it really weaves the interests of X-Men with the interests of people that are outside and seeing Krakoa from the outside together in a way that we haven't really done yet. And so I just think if you're going to sell me a new X-Men book, give me something that none of the other X-Men books are doing already. I agree with Harry that I think the first third was hot garbage. However, I disagree with Harry. I think this is the most I've ever liked Bernard Chang's art, and I think it should always be colored this way. So we'll get into that too. So we have this is, I think, as far apart as the 4 of us have ever been on an issue ever. And I think we got to start with a brief discussion about the release placement, because if you're watching this now, years from now, we have to give you some context on this. This was originally meant to be released 11 months ago in the middle of April 2020, which is right when the pandemic break hit all of comic distribution. And so they held it. But this was originally going to be released alongside X Factor #1 that was going to come out the week after this. It was originally around issue 10 of most of the launch titles. So it was going to hit before X of Swords was going to hit. Yeah. So now we're 11 months later. It's hard to know yet where it's going to be placed. Is this going to definitively place itself before X of Swords, after X of Swords? This issue, I don't think, says any of that for sure. And also, there are some reported art differences between the physical and the digital versions of this issue, especially on the last page, where clearly the book that went up digital had some art that had since been reworked, because the digital version also had the last page of other new X-Men books coming out that was as it would have been 11 months ago. So I think the thing to just put out there is there are probably some changes that are going to be made to this comic, and it may or may not place it more forward or backward than it is. But the one final thing I want to add to that before I give it to Harry is I think Vida Ayala is a very different author now than when they probably originally wrote this, which would have been another 6 months even before it was meant to be released. So we're in this interesting thing where this is being released alongside their New Mutants, and the New Mutants is showing skills, editorial confidence that maybe this series is not going to have on display, which I think is like a weird place for any creator to be in. And I think that might be something that shows through here in Children of the Atom. So thoughts about kind of the relative placement, Harry and Fariha and Tyler, and then we'll talk about the actual story.
All I wanted to say was I think the original plan was for this to tie into X of Swords, and I have absolutely no idea how that would have happened for reasons we'll get into later. Like, it just makes no sense. But yeah, I actually thought about that too, Peter. Like, if maybe Ayala has developed their kind of writing abilities a bit more sense, it is something on my mind at the least.
I'm saying that if this was scheduled when it was, I would not be reading their New Mutants. I would be like, nope. You can't make me. I would have missed out, but the thing is, nope. You can't get away with this.
Tyler, any thoughts on placement before we dig into plot?
The only way we can place it is with respect to Outlaw. So if we can place Outlaw before certain events, then we will know. Unfortunately, I think Outlaw has not referenced anything. I don't know if Outlaw happens before Empire or after.
I don't Outlaw know the kid book, like the No Kid Heroes book?
Yeah.
And I don't know whether Outlaw, is before or after.
It doesn't exist, to be honest. As soon as we're done with it, we'll forget about it. It doesn't exist. Kamala's Law doesn't exist. None of that.
But it's important in terms of placement of this book because it specifically mentioned that law, reference it. So I think that's the only way we can place it as it stands now.
That's a really good point. And there's a lot of books now that are releasing that were originally going to release a year ago. And originally, clearly, Outlawed was going to be happening entirely before King in Black. But now we have Power Pack, which is happening during Outlawed, being released, at least in part, after King in Black. So there's definitely somebody, when this is all over, you can never tell these things till all the stories are done. And then you kind of look at the ending status quo of each one and see if it takes somebody off the board. And that's usually how those of us who do this continuity stuff tend to figure this out. All right, now let's dig into the actual story. And I think to talk about this book, we've got to start by talking about the end, right? There's no way to talk about this. So at the end, they go through a gate and they can't. But we have to now look at all the things leading up to that. So Buddy, who's our main narrator here, who is, I hate to even say these words, but Cyclops-Lass. Buddy says that they have always felt different. We're led to believe that maybe that's because she was, or they were a mutant. The X-Men believe they're mutants. The kids even seem to believe they're mutants. In Buddy's voiceover, they say, while the rest of the world sleeps, we're ready to embrace our future, which clearly is mirroring the monologue from House of X. But they roll on up to the gate, can't go through. And when they can't go through that, they say, okay, next time. So my question for the panel, starting with Tyler, is, do they think they're mutants? And if they're not mutants, who are they?
I mean, that's the big question. I think we will get an answer to.
But before we know the answer, do you think they think they're mutants?
That's the thing. I don't know if they think they are mutants, and for some reason they can use the gate, or logically, that's what I'm thinking. If their powers are not natural to them, that means, they created them somehow through some technology. There is no reason why they think they're mutants, or no reason why they think they can use the gate. So my thinking is that they think they are mutants. And then the next question is that, why are they trying multiple times to pass through the gates that apparently doesn't work?
Well,
and apparently they are truly devastated by, so that's these two questions that I think still doesn't quite gel in my logic yet. Because
Fariha, do you care at all?
I mean, no, I mean, Krakoa's gate is me. I am Krakoa's gate.
She's like,
That's why I'm not
stop.
letting them.
Yeah.
Stop. Nick, okay, can I actually just say why I'm hating this so much? Like,
Sure. I mean, it might take us into our
Please.
next topic, but that I think that's fine.
So, okay, so the thing is, we are fighting for our space in comic book or in representation in any media, right? So the thing is, I am baffled. I'm baffled by the fact that mutant, where we have seen so many colorful mutants that exist, and then there's even one over here, Maggot, whose intestine apparently are like, you know, showing up outside, like, which I didn't know. You guys probably knew about it. There's like so many different mutants and stuff. And Vidaela, who is person of color, who's non-binary, and they are allowed to write a book, and their first instinct is to make these mutants who look like existing mutants, like, and they're calling themselves even Cyclops-Lass, they're calling themselves a Marvel guy, and they're all just caricature of those existing mutants. Like, why these children exist? Why are they here? Like, why are they? And it's not even one of those, you know how in Miss Marvel, when G. Willow Wilson wrote it, she's like, oh, I'm a fan of Miss Marvel, so I'm going to be Miss Marvel. There was actually a reason, even though it's like, okay, fine, whatever. It's one person. 5 of them decided to be just a caricature of existing characters. Like, why can't we have new characters? Why can't they have just separate, like, individual different powers? Like, I just don't get it. And at that point, it just lost me, because I was like, why? Mutants don't need that. There could be so many different mutants. It's just that lack. Like, what? Editors told them to do it? Then decline this. To say that I'm not gonna give more oxygen to the assholes on the internet who are like, oh yeah, like, you know, you cannot do representation without taking other property. Like, no, don't do that. And this is, I mean, I was just so mad. I mean, if I could throw, because iPads cost so much, I couldn't throw my iPad, or else I would throw my iPad and break it. Like, I'm glad that this wasn't like actually a physical copy. I would have tore this. Like, no, screw this.
So my read was, and please correct me if I'm wrong, but my read was, these are humans that know they are not mutants, even though they keep trying. And they are, you know, not in a derogatory way, but they're kind of posers who are trying to emulate this kind of culture that they've become kind of very attached to. But I thought the drama came in where it got interesting at the end is they are being rejected because they cannot get through there. So I looked at it more as this interesting group of kind of misfit kids who are trying really hard for reasons we're not sure where, got these suits and this kind of tech power stuff. I don't know if that's true, but we'll see. And are, you know, looking at Krakoan culture from the outside, kind of wanting to be on the inside. Now, I could be very wrong in that, but that was kind of my read.
So to that point, I mean, if that is the case, then I really don't want this title. I want nothing to do with this title. Because the thing is, it's equivalent of saying we have issues with Black community or other minority community, but hey, guess what? Let's look at it from the point of view of white kids who are allies of those communities. I'm not interested in that. I'm not interested in that story. There's already stories associated with mutants that needs to be told, that we need to hear about, because I would have liked to see that, some mutants are not interested into going to Krakoa. But guess what? Ed Brisson have already done it in New Mutants. Like, you know, there were already the story with Beak and stuff. And that would have been something, okay, these kids are, but then these kids are just knockoff. I mean, that is just driving me insane that these are knockoffs when this could have been like, you could have just, there's like 16 million mutants out there. You could have just picked up any one of those. You have to make this Cyclops-Lass, like, fuck this. No. Like, sorry. I'm done.
So I think you two are taking this, actually either side of this, to the thing I really want to dig into here, which is the aspect of cultural appropriation that they are doing of mutants, and how that's reflective of a lot of themes both in the Marvel universe and in the real world. And I have to say, this is a hard conversation to have. Everybody brings their own intersectionality to us. So we're not trying to hurt or offend anybody here, and we're doing our best. And if we speak wrongly in some way, we are definitely interested in hearing your perspective and growing from that. But we're going to do our best to have the conversation as genuinely as we can here. So I want to go into something that Fariha talked about, because this is the thing that gave me discomfort here too, which is that here are people who are feeling dejected and oppressed for ways that may or may not be real, but it feels real to them. We all remember what it's being like being a teenager. You know, Buddy clearly is going through some kind of identity decision of their own. Maybe they're going to be non-binary or certainly not asexual, at least based on this, because we see that Buddy's attracted to the friend of the other person. And what we're getting is they see in mutants something that they can identify with. Mutants being outsiders, mutants having to struggle, mutants being oppressed, nobody accepting mutants. And so they've decided mutants are cool, which is fine. But then do they like cross a line in trying to actually, you know, take the names of mutants, take the expression of powers of mutants? You know, is this an analog to the real world? And this is real touchy, delicate stuff of somebody who, you know, is non-white, loves hip hop culture, and is saying the N-word when they're rapping along with hip hop songs by Black creators, right? Is that kind of what this is?
Yes,
I don't know.
Yeah. No,
Thoughts?
I mean, that was my, I didn't, you know, I think my read was that, you know, this is not a great thing they're doing. It's not like, I think portrayed in a super positive light. It's more like murky, and it's got an interesting feel because I'm watching these characters like, this is a weird thing you're doing. And it's kind of, I don't want to say sad, but like a little melancholy almost. But it's not like a traditionally heroic thing. I felt when I was reading it.
But to me, I would like to see this from the point of view of mutants. I want to see this from the point of view of mutants rather than these sorry-ass characters who are feeling sorry for themselves and they're like, okay, who are more oppressed than us? Let's be like them. Like, I'm not interested into that story. I'm not interested. And the fact that this is written by, like, you know, a person of color who, as like, you know, who identifies as a non-binary, no, I'm not interested. Make the story from the point of view of mutants. You know, make that okay, in the end, Buddy was the one who couldn't go through while the rest could go through.
Right, that's what I'm interested in. I want one of them to be mutants, and then I want to see the dissension in the ranks as one of them actually turns out to be the mutant. And it reminds me of like a movie like The Craft, you know, like one of them turns out to be more of a witch than the other ones. And like, what does that do for all of them that were like playing with being witches when one of them is like a real deal witch? And then they have to be like, some of us were kind of just dressing up and playing with glamours, but you are a witch, you know? And like, what does that, I want to see that story. That's really interesting to me here. I don't know, Tyler, this has been the three of us going off for a while. What do you have to say about all this?
I mean, I feel slightly different from what you guys are saying.
Okay.
Like, I mean, these are teenagers. I mean, they're in high school, right? So they are, you know, they're teenagers, and except for the Daycrawler guy. I don't know if he's.
I think he's a bit young. Their names.
I think they're kind of intentionally bad. I'm not even joking.
No, like, they were.
They're absolutely intentionally bad. Yeah. Nobody names a character Cyclops-Lass and it's serious.
Yeah. I mean,
it's called gimmick.
I'll say that in an interview that like, she didn't want to use these names, but but these were like, I believe one of the editors thought of this idea and asked if she's interested in writing the book. But the thing is this, like, as a teenager, you try to emulate something that you admire. You don't think about appropriation. From that perspective, like, as a young guy, as you know, as a teenager, if I love to listen to raps, I mean, I don't care if I'm Asian, or because I don't think in that way when I'm young. So I don't think they were intentionally appropriating, assuming they are humans. And I don't think the intention of what they're doing is bad. So, like, you know, the starting point, the point where they're coming from is that, like, I'm trying to emulate as people that I look up to. And in this case, it happens to be mutants. And in this case, it happens to be mutants who have found their own nation, who has found an ability to stand up to people who have oppressed them for them being themselves. And in that way, they are like thinking, you know, I feel I'm searching for an identity. I feel like I'm being oppressed in one way or another. And, I look at these mutants, they are my heroes. And so I'm trying to emulate them and like hoping and praying that I'm a mutant myself, that I can pass through a gate. Maybe because they are teenagers and maybe they learned that as mutants get their powers as when in puberty, so they are hoping, they're trying over and over again, hoping that at one point they're real mutants, they can get through and they don't have to rely on whatever methods that they're using right now to power themselves.
Well, I want to put a little bit of a cap on this, not to end it, but because I think there's some other themes attached to this to get to.
Yeah.
In saying, I actually completely understand where Fariha is coming from, because this is usually where I come from on any X-Men book, right?
Yeah.
I like new characters being made, but like do it with some purpose, do it in a way that I'm going to actually be able to care about them, and it doesn't just like detract from the existing characters. And I think the things that I really liked about it were like, I loved the whole scene in the gym. I liked when they were out of the costumes.
Yeah.
To me, that was really interesting because it was a lot closer to this discussion about identity, about feeling like you are a part of something or not a part of something, hearing how the other kids in the gym reacted to them saying they were Dazzler fans. Like that was really interesting to me. I don't really want to, I could not possibly care about seeing these 5 characters in their costumes hopping around like sobbing banks being robbed. If we don't get a single other scene of that, I'm down. But here's the other thing I want to add to this discussion too. Is this Vita Ayla's way as a creator of color, as a non-binary person, of actually commenting about how fans engage with X-Men? I mean, no, you don't think so?
No, this is not.
I absolutely see that. I absolutely see this, the way that everybody kind of wants to
fully
say, oh yeah, I was bullied in school because I played video games. I'm just like the X-Men. And Viola is like, not really. You weren't born that way. And then also, how then Marvel on the other side is always saying about, oh, X-Men stands for this minority metaphor and that minority. And Viola is saying, no, not really. It's actually pretty different. Like, I just felt like there was this meta narrative of the book of Viola being like, let's talk about how messed up this is from every side, where everybody just wants to adopt the X-Men as their banner, by actually looking at how messed up it is in the universe and how angry it's going to make some of you to have this group of people adopting X-Men as their banner. I would like to give Vita Ayala that much credit and assume that that's what they're heading for. Yeah. I could be wrong. I could be proven wrong in the next issue, but that's where I landed.
I can't imagine it won't be. If
that is the case, do better.
Okay,
do better.
Marvel Girl.
Make this the second issue, because this is clearly not a first issue. Like, I don't know anything about these characters, and the first thing I'm seeing, they're fighting and they're calling each other those awful names, and then I'm like, who are these characters?
And it was impossible to follow that scene too, by the way. If we can talk about art, it was wretched. Yeah. You could not figure out what was happening, from what direction, why it was being paneled the way it was. All the costumes are hideous and they all look the same, and you couldn't tell the other people apart. I mean, it was badly planned at the most essential level, and the execution was horrific.
Right, and that's what I'm saying.
Do you think that, like, because of the need to replace the book at a later time, that maybe Bernard Chan had to actually redraw some of the things, like with very little notice, because he's on another book right now?
Yeah, but the redrawn version would have been what hit print. We've proven that this digital version had old pages in it. So like, I think if that's the case, I think we're probably seeing the original version here. I don't know. Here, I'm never going to own it physically, so I'll never know.
Yeah,
I'm giving it too much credit, but I was like, man, this opening is really off kilter and kind of weird. And I'm like, oh, maybe that's part of like the tone that they want to give. And no, it's just kind of like a badly done opening.
No, because that's what I'm saying. I was firstly angry. I'm like, it's doing that whole nonsense that I keep talking about, where it's like, yeah, X-Men world. Remember, you all read Claremont, so we're gonna read this. I thought it's doing that thing, but then it's even more like upsetting, the fact that these are brand new character and this is their first appearance. I'm like, what? This is it? Start with one of them waking up, getting ready for school. Like, heading... Right,
like give us a way into this. In media res
like
battle is not the way.
Yeah, how they're all related to each other. Then they actually have the battle. End of issue 1. Issue 2, it's about how they're like connecting to the mutant culture, all of that. I don't know, make one of them mutant.
And I just think the layout of this was incoherent. Like we're over somebody's shoulder and then they were blasting somebody, but then we were on the roof, and then the Archangel character was on the ground again, but then somebody was giving a high five, but then a traffic light fell down. Like when I see a sequence like this, because this happens to me a lot, I'm a quick reader. Sometimes nuance can be a little bit lost, whether that's in art and writing. I will go back through and actually write down like why I'm having a problem with each panel and try to see if I'm just missing the connection. And over time, I did manage to figure out what was happening, but I don't think that any of this was good enough to be worth the amount of time that I had to put in to figure out what was happening. That said, the one thing I'll say about the art is I've read a lot of Bernard Chang's art. He was on Teen Titans for a while on the relaunch, which was also a lot of new characters, which I also liked because I like new characters. And I think when he's colored in this really flat, kind of glossy way, the weird kind of asymmetry of the way he draws people lands really badly. And especially when people just do that like gradient color to try to create, light across a face, it makes his art look just really weird and blotchy. And the colors here I thought were like really quite clever in a way, and I'm trying by Marcelo Maiolo, where they actually found a way to do some shading on the faces and show depth on the faces and give the faces a more three-dimensional angularity instead of just playing with the flat angularity that Chang drew. And I actually thought that was probably the best I've seen anybody handle his art. I think it's weird, it's hard to color. Like he's one of these artists that I just think a lot of colorists totally whiff on. And the reason I enjoyed it, maybe because I've read so much of him, I was like, this is actually a really good way to handle that. But it still doesn't change that the choreography of that scene was terrible.
Really?
Any other comments on the art? Tyler.
I mean, I did not feel that the choreography was difficult to follow. The fast cuts between the fight scenes, I think it was intentional to make us confused because the kids themselves, this appears to be the very first time they fight someone. So they themselves were a little bit confused too. So it adds to that sense of like, they don't know what they're doing, and they know a bit of what they're doing. They don't know a lot of what they're doing. Like, but I do agree that like Marvel guy suddenly appearing like on the rooftop was a little bit off for me. So I was like, wait, what happened?
This brings me back to one of our critiques that we've had of Rod Rice working with Vita Ayla on New Mutants, which is like when you have a relatively young new cast and they're not as iconic and you don't know them just from a little sliver of their costume, you just need to give this kind of thing more space, right? If this was these actual X-Men, if this was Jean and Nightcrawler and Angel or whatever, you could probably get away with this because as readers, we would orient to it a little bit better. There would still be perspective problems, but we would follow it a little bit better. And since now we've seen this across 2 Vita Ayla books, and not for nothing, this is one of my major complaints about them for years. I'm saying like, I'm not willing to lay it at the feet of any particular person on the team. I think the whole creative team misfired.
But so my main complaint is like, why are there random Krakoan gates placed in these like dingy places?
I know. I was
like in an alley.
Gonna talk about it.
Like underneath the piers on Coney Island. Like what? So they can use the gate during high tide?
Yeah, exactly.
Well, okay. Let's talk about the Krakoan contingent here. So we get one contingent who visits these kids mid-battle, and it's spectacularly comprised of Magma, Pixie, and Maggot. All because we demanded it, and because they're like, oh, you should come along, and then we also have the A-team on the moon in weirdly the first downtime scene we've had, I think, in all of the Hickman reign that includes Summers people and also non-Summers people together having a downtime, and I think probably the best written one. So there's not all bad about this comic for me. And some of the things they say, it's not compulsory. No one is going to force you to do something you don't want, but when you're ready, come home. Another quote is, they may not be safe in the human world. And then a final quote is, Krakoa is open to all mutants, but they have to accept it as their home. So we're seeing the other side of this, group of mutants that these kids are idolizing, where they're like, you can't just want to like us. You can't just think you're cool. You've got to radically accept us as your home. And when you accept it, then you can be a part of it. What did you all think, totally forgetting about the children for a second, about what we saw with the X-Men in this issue? Harry?
I mean,
Tyler, let's start with Tyler. Tyler.
Sorry. I mean, I really enjoyed this discussion, and like it places each of them in a very I mean, it plays them ideologically, like Wolverine is like, do not abandon any mutants, and then Cyclops is more like, well, do not force. They have a choice.
Yeah.
And there's a reason why Jean is in the trouble, because Jean is like, do not force, but also do not abandon them. But let's just talk to them. And
Yeah.
I mean, it plays to what I think the core principles is in some ways, even though Krakoan era Wolverine has not been going out to look at, to rescue kids. He was doing his own things all the time. So I don't know. I mean, I prefer this Wolverine to that Wolverine.
I agree.
So, but I mean, in short, I think, I love this sequence because I think it works really well, and Ayala has a really good handle on the senior X team.
I agree. Fariha, was this a little breath of fresh air in the middle of your seething hatred? Did you get a little break from the rage?
No, I mean, look at her face.
Oh, no.
No, I mean, first of all, it's like, trust Cerebro. So when Cerebro, how you say it? Like when Cerebro said that I can't find them as mutant because they are not mutant.
Yeah.
That's why.
That's the tell.
Like, just believe in that, and then or just
trust
be like
Cerebro.
Yeah, trust your, that should be a t-shirt. But that's what I'm saying. It's just like,
no, but
it just,
I was like,
but,
how don't you know? That was
how don't you know?
They did not realize that the whole of Russia did not shown any mutants initially.
Okay.
Well, it's just because we talked about it on our chat. It's like the mutant population is really weirdly disproportionate to the white people. So there should be 65% Asian, but they're not. So it's just because of that. Because Cerebro is also racist. But the thing is, I'm just like, if you've done this before, just know, just trust in the system or just look into it. Like, why is Cerebro? That should be the thing. Like, you know what? We should talk to someone. That why is Cerebro not picking it up? They're doing the same nonsense they were doing before Hickman, where they were just like, oh yeah, whatever, let's play pool, instead of going. And then all the things that they were talking about, that we can't force them and stuff like that. Great. Let's just let's have this book. Let's just have this book about Wolverine looking for new kids. But no, we are. We're looking at posters.
But Storm is going to approach them.
Oh, now Storm is going to approach them.
That is the conclusion. And then, of course, when you play pool with Cyclops, only Cyclops play, because he has this innate spatial ability with his powers, and he basically down all the boss. I mean, I thought that was really interesting, because interesting. I mean, I thought this is a fun callback, because Ayala clearly loves the X-Men.
Harry, you've been holding your tongue down there for a while through some long monologues from the other three of us. What do you have to say about this X-Men scene?
God, you mistook my quiet tongue for a lot of interest. No. I mean, it's a perfectly fine scene. I thought that was all written really well. I don't love the art, but honestly, when I was reading this initially, I was so off kilter from the opening third. I was like, okay, we're talking about what are we gonna do with the kids thing? This makes sense. And then when they said, we can't see him on Cerebro, I was like, oh, okay, they're humans. And that's when I kind of I perked up a bit, because I was like, so what is this book exactly? So I think it was perfectly fine.
And then the thing is, this also brings back my hatred towards this original team of X-Men, because I absolutely hate them with all my heart, because this is also another thing. Your effing island is filled with kids who are unsupervised. And you are doing nothing for them.
Right, they're like, let's find some more. Although that was kind of represented by Magma. They're like, we have school and stuff, and Magma's like, you could just get that downloaded.
Yeah,
which is a nice comment about
that was supposed to answer it. Yeah, you answered it a year ago. That was the reasoning. We got brain school now.
Yeah.
But the thing is, these kids are running around without any supervision and doing who knows what. They're going after Shadow King. Shadow King, they're taking Shadow King as their mentor. And
that's why Ayala is addressing it.
I'm actually, more so than any book, I have no idea what this is supposed to be, and I almost don't mean that as an insult. I was talking to Tyler off the show, saying the premise of this book, if what I'm thinking is right, it feels like a subplot for like a random issue. But this is an actual series from the poser's perspective, not to, look down, but like, I don't know what this is going to look like. It feels like it could be a mini series. I can't imagine this is an ongoing, but the fact that this is what the position they're taking is like, Fariha, I totally get why you think this is all nonsense and not worth it. But it's such an odd move. And also like Ayala is just such an interesting person to write about this kind of thing that I'm honestly very curious about the next issue. I just have no idea what it's going to be.
I mean, I actually thought like Fariha would like, I mean,
Same.
love
I totally
Buddy because Buddy basically said what she has been echoing in the Facebook group, because Buddy was like, how does moving to a place where mutants are persecuted equals mutant raising an army or mutants abandoning their dream,
Yes, I know. I'm with Buddy on that one. Stop calling yourself Cyclops-Lass. Stop calling yourself that. Then I'm completely with you because that just pissed me off. Because the thing is, here's the thing. This should have been issue 2. Like if this was issue 1, if the issue 1 kind of showed us who these characters are, why they are choosing these names, what they're like, it's like, oh, one time Cyclops saved me, so I am now Cyclops-Lass.
Yeah.
Like, one time, like I like this, like the fact that 5 of them has same outfit and like that boggles my mind. It should have been one of them. One of them should have been mutant. It should have been New Mutants, some of the New Mutants character interacting with them and learning about this. And then we're seeing it from that point of view that, oh, okay, there are actually poses out there. Because guess what? It is true. It's part of life. And it's an important aspect to talk about, whether they are mutants and they're not coming to the island, or they're humans, they think that they're mutants and they're trying to appropriate a culture. It's all good. Not this way.
I just don't, I don't read them thinking they are mutants. It really does feel like wishful thinking. That was the last page. It's kind of sad. It's like just wanting.
I gotta throw. I do have to get us to wrap up here, and so I'm going to throw one comment on that, and then I'm going to play host privilege and tie things up. I remember, I know the X-Men weren't real, but I remember at points as a teenager, I had one window in my bedroom looking out like into an alleyway and just being like, I would take anybody who would come to this window from any form of fiction and whisk me away. I'm like, if Storm flew up to the window and was like, you're coming to Xavier's, I'd be like, great. If Santa Claus came to the window and was like, you're an elf, I would say, great. Those are the 2 I remember in specific. I was like, maybe Santa will come. I know he's not real, but what if he was and I could just leave here? And so like, I think if I was a teenager right now and there was a Krakoan gate over yonder outside of my window, I would walk up to that gate and tap my hand against that gate every single freaking day.
Yeah. No, that's true. That's true. But you wouldn't call yourself Cyclops-Lass.
No, I would not.
You wouldn't call yourself my Marvel guy. So, you wouldn't call yourself any of that. But yes,
Reddit dorks are on the internet too much. These guys would do it. And that's why it's kind of shallow. It's not that. All
right. So here's the final thing I'm going to say about this, because I think something Fariha said about this being issue 2 is really interesting. Comics are serialized fiction. In serialized fiction, whether it's TV shows, comics, whatever, you got to hook the person before they can wind up wandering away. And some of the narrative tricks that you might use in a movie or in a novel that makes you really intensely dislike the situation or have questions about the situation at the beginning don't always work in a #1 issue. And whether that's making the character super unlikable or giving us a status quo that just bugs, it doesn't always work out. And I think that if you were to look at the last year of Marvel, there's some series that got away with that, and there's some series that didn't, right? X-Force started with Professor X being shot in the head. A lot of people were like, oh, you're ruining everything about Krakoa right away. And we were like, or we could just hang in because this is an interesting plot point. To take a different perspective, I think if you look at Kelly Thompson's recent Black Widow, the plot that she saddled Black Widow with there was, even though you knew there was going to be a way to find out and get your way out of it, it just really took away so much agency from the character that was so gross that I know a lot of people tapped out of it immediately. So I think, this is a valid concern. To give a #1, it's fine to have mystery in a #1 issue, and it's fine to ask questions in a #1 issue, but you got to make us like it, and you got to make us not be so uninterested in the answer to the question that there's some danger that we might not want to get a second one. And I do think that this issue had trouble passing that test. but we want to hear from all of you out there. Did it pass the test for you or not? Some of us are ready and willing to get the second issue. Some of us have some positive thoughts. Some of us have some negative thoughts. Did this cross that line for you to get you interested enough to read a number 2? And do you think this was maybe just not the right way to start the issue? We want to hear from you here on This Week in X, because that is all we have to say about, well, actually not really. I am calling time that this is all that we have to say on Children of the Atom number 1. But this really proves to me the thing that we say all the time, which is what, Fariha?
Sometimes better when you read together.
And
now
I really
have to change my catchphrase.
But you know what?
Sometimes it's better.
This to me is the issue that proves that, because the issue that divides people the most is the most interesting thing to talk about together, because it unites us in how much we have to say about all these X-Men characters, about this Krakoan status quo, and quite frankly, about how we don't want to go back. We don't want to go back to crappy mutant stories that were being told before Krakoa. We want to always be going forward and read X-Men better, that gets better and better together. So on behalf of myself and my incredibly brainy panel of mini cerebros here, Harry, Fariha, and Tyler, thank you so much for being a part of this Week in X discussion with us. And we hope you'll join us again both next week and for issue number 2 of Children of the Atom.